Have you ever found yourself lying awake at 2 a.m., vividly replaying some incredibly awkward conversation from like 5 years ago, down to the exact tone of your voice? But at the exact same time, you have absolutely zero memory of what you had for a totally normal lunch yesterday. It feels completely random, but I promise you, it's not. Your mind isn't just a passive hard drive. It actively filters the world based on emotional weight. Because that awkward moment made you feel anxious, your brain flagged it in big red letters as important information. Meanwhile, your boring lunch tossed right into the mental trash bin. Which brings us to Section 1, the invisible mental filter. Let's dive right in and see exactly how this invisible mechanism shapes our everyday experiences. So your brain is processing a massive amount of information every single second. To keep you from just completely shutting down from overwhelm, it relies on a specific set of rules. First up, it prioritizes potential threats. From an evolutionary standpoint, missing a danger was way more costly than missing a pretty sunset, right? Second, it actively seeks comfort in familiar things. We often prefer a certain song or routine simply because we've experienced it a bunch of times. It's a psychological shortcut that says familiar equals safe. And third, it highlights your current interests. Have you ever started thinking about buying a specific car and suddenly you see it literally everywhere? The world didn't actually change. Your brain's filter just shifted its focus. And this perfectly explains why a single negative comment can totally ruin your day, even if you just got 10 glowing compliments. It's a phenomenon psychologists call negativity bias. Basically, our attention is just vastly more influenced by negative information than positive. Back in ancient times, this bias kept us alive. But today, in a modern world where our phones give us a constant, unlimited stream of negative news, this survival trait can totally trick us into feeling like everyday life is way worse than it actually is. All right, moving on to Section 2, why we overthink everything. Let's take a look at how this exact same protective brain causes us to completely overthink perfectly normal, everyday situations. Okay, we have all been through this agonizing sequence. You send a text to a friend or coworker. An hour goes by, crickets. Then another hour, suddenly your mind starts racing. They're probably busy. Wait, no, maybe they're mad at me. Oh no, did I say something weird yesterday? Literally nothing in the physical world has changed except the clock ticking, but your mind has just written an entire psychological thriller. Why? Because the human brain absolutely hates uncertainty. When facts are missing, your brain desperately tries to fill in the blanks. And thanks to that negativity bias we just talked about, it almost always defaults to the absolute worst-case scenario. But let's contrast that anxiety with reality for a second. When we make a tiny mistake, like spilling a bit of coffee or fumbling a word in a meeting, we feel like a giant blinding spotlight just swung around to highlight our failure to the whole world. But just look at these numbers. The reality is that the vast majority of human attention, around 95% of it, is pointed squarely inward. People are just too busy stressing over their own unreturned texts and their own awkward moments to focus on yours. This brings us to a concept psychologists call the spotlight effect. It's our tendency to totally overestimate how much other people are actually noticing or judging our appearance and mistakes. So you know that embarrassing thing you've been replaying in your head for the last 3 days? There is a really, really good chance the other person has completely forgotten about it, or honestly, barely even registered it in the first place. Understanding this pattern, it's honestly so liberating. It gives you full permission to just let yourself off the hook. Up next is Section 3, the unfinished task trap. Let's explore why our minds refuse to let us relax, even long after we've closed our laptops for the day. So, have you ever noticed how a half-written email or a half-finished chore can just nag at you all weekend, while you instantly forget the 10 massive projects you actually finished? This is known as the Zeigarnik effect. Think of it like having way too many open tabs on your computer browser, but in your brain. An incomplete task just stays mentally active in the background, creating this lingering sense of dread or unease. Your brain literally won't let it go until it feels resolved. This, by the way, is exactly why doing a brain dump, just writing your tasks down on paper, provides such instant relief. You're giving your brain an external guarantee so it finally feels safe enough to close that mental tab. And here is the harsh truth about all those mental tabs. Your attention is a strictly limited resource. We all love to think we can multitask, but your conscious brain simply cannot give everything equal priority. Constantly toggling between those open mental tabs, random notifications, and actual real-life conversations leaves you completely exhausted. Why does this happen? Well, because every single time your attention shifts, your brain burns actual energy to reorient itself.
Deep, uninterrupted focus feels vastly different than checking your phone every 5 minutes, precisely because you are fiercely protecting that precious cognitive resource.
Let's move on to section 4, the illusion of value. We're going to unpack how our invisible mental filter heavily warps our perception of what things, and even people, are actually worth to us. Have you ever stuck it out in a totally unfulfilling relationship or maybe a miserable job just because you felt like, well, I've already put so many years into this? That is the sunk cost effect in action. We tragically trap ourselves in bad situations because walking away feels like admitting all that past effort was totally wasted. But here's the thing, that time is gone anyway, whether you stay or leave. To break this illusion, you have to flip your mindset. We usually ask the flawed question, how much time have I already invested? Instead, we need to be asking the healthy question, knowing what I know right now, would I choose to get involved in this again today? And that brings us to another wild illusion of value, hedonic adaptation. Think about a time you desperately wanted a major upgrade. Maybe a flashy new phone, a big promotion, or a nicer apartment. When you finally got it, it felt amazing, right? No way you could ever be sad again. But give it a few months and it just became your normal life. This psychological mechanism is exactly why that new car smell fades in our minds. We naturally revert back to our baseline level of satisfaction. It's pretty strong proof that constantly chasing the next big material upgrade won't actually buy you lasting happiness. Because today's extraordinary always becomes tomorrow's ordinary. This illusion of value also really messes with how we view past relationships. When a chapter ends, our minds have this funny habit of selectively zooming in on the good parts while conveniently editing out all the reasons it didn't work in the first place. Nostalgia is essentially a highly edited, heavily filtered highlight reel. It's so important to remember, you can miss someone without actually wanting them back in your life. You might just be missing the routine, the comfort, or even the version of yourself you were back then. Emotions aren't always instructions. Just because you feel a sense of loss doesn't mean you need to hit undo on a healthy, necessary decision. Finally, we arrive at section 5, the power of the pause. We've seen just how messy, biased, and wildly complex the human mind really is, so let's wrap up by focusing on the ultimate takeaway for your daily life. If there is just one thing you take away from this explainer, please let it be this. Understanding your own psychology doesn't mean you're going to magically transform into some perfectly rational robot who never gets stressed or overthinks. You can know exactly what the spotlight effect is and still feel totally embarrassed. But awareness does give you something incredibly powerful. It grants you a vital moment to pause. It gives you a tiny bit of intellectual humility, allowing you to step back when you feel yourself reacting and say, hey, these feelings are valid, but they might just be a psychological pattern acting up, rather than the absolute truth. So let's walk through this really empowering 3-step sequence. Step 1, recognize the pattern. Catch yourself right in the middle of spiraling over that unreturned text. Step 2, pause and question it. Literally ask yourself, wait, is this reality or is this just my negativity bias talking? And then, step 3, choose your response. This simple little sequence is how you move from a state of blind, anxious reactivity into a state of self-aware curiosity. Remember, you absolutely do not have to obey every single thought that pops into your head. I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to take into your week. The next time you feel stressed, offended, or totally overwhelmed, I want you to stop and ask yourself, what is actually happening here, and what is my mind adding to this situation? Challenge yourself to question that invisible filter. Try viewing your own mind with fascination instead of constant judgment. Because I promise you, once you start getting curious about how your brain really works, ordinary life starts looking a whole lot more interesting. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.